Have you ever met real evil, like a real psychopath?
Too many times to recount. I was in the kind of business where you get them all the time. What would you consider a rapist or a pedophile or someone who regularly abuses their spouse? That's pure evil in my opinion, but it wouldn't stop me from defending them as vigorously as I could and hoping they get off. When he has the opportunity to grab cash that no one's going to know about, he does it. And he starts a new life in Thailand, and he has a very good life as a rich expat.
Well, hello there, Internet. It's Pete here from Thairish Times. What's the story? I hope you're keeping well. And no, I'm not back in Thailand, unfortunately. My guest today, Stephen Shaiken, has come all the way to Dublin for this interview. Now, Stephen is from the United States. He spent a number of years in Bangkok, and we're going to get into his life in Bangkok today. He's also written this book, Bangkok Shadows, which I read and I really enjoyed. We're going to talk about the book as well. And then I suppose the most interesting part of the interview for me was that Stephen was a criminal defense lawyer in the United States for 33 years. Now, a lot of people say criminal defense lawyers are professional liars. Other people would say that without them, governments would be able to lock up whoever they wanted. So we're going to get into his stories about being a criminal defense lawyer today. So I hope you enjoyed the interview, folks. Let's get straight into it. Leave me a comment, like the video, share the video, and let's do it.
Steve, thanks very much for doing this. This is first face-to-face interview for a while, so I'm pretty excited.
So am I.
Yeah, in Dublin City. How do you like Dublin?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
A little colder than I thought, but the people are really nice.
Oh, we're great people over here, Steve.
You surely are. My wife's married. My wife's family is here. One of her nieces married an Irish man, so I'm quite familiar with people and the culture, and it's fantastic to be here.
Okay, brilliant. Let's get back to the very start, okay? Tell everybody where you're from.
Well, I was born and raised in New York City, and I spent about 37 years in the San Francisco Bay Area. And now, after a brief interregnum in Bangkok, I've been living in Tampa, Florida, and loving it for the last 5 years.
What really intrigued me about this interview was when you sent me the email and you told me you were a criminal defense lawyer. Because I'm a big fan of true crime, okay? My thing on YouTube is I love watching interrogations. I love that, you know, the detectives quizzing people and people talking. A lot of people talk when they have no lawyer present. They get themselves into a lot of problems. So can you just tell us a little bit about your career as a criminal defense lawyer?
Sure, it lasted a very long time. I became a criminal defense lawyer because I was pursuing a master's degree, which I did get in creative writing. And one of my teachers, a very fine writer named Kay Boyle, who sadly isn't remembered as well as she should be, said to me, "I think you've got the makings of a criminal defense lawyer." Don't ask me why she said that. And she said, "There's a class that I co-teach, and there's going to be a very prominent attorney named Charles Gary. He was sort of a radical lawyer that represented the Black Panthers and the Chicago 7, people like that. And I had nothing better to do, so I went to the class, and I just fell in love with the whole idea. He explained what criminal lawyers do. He went through the whole process from picking juries, and I just said, this is what I want to do. So I applied to law school, and I went to the law school that gave me money, Brooklyn Law School, which turned out to be great because that's a law school that was known for turning out criminal lawyers. It wasn't the place to go at that time if you wanted to be a Wall Street lawyer. Now you can, but now they wouldn't have let me in. And my dream job was to get a job with the Legal Aid Society, which was the equivalent of a public defender. And I managed to wrangle my way into a summer internship, which led to that job. I spent 3 years doing that, and it was fantastic because there's no way in the world in the private sector a young lawyer right out of law school would be thrown into court and get the chance to try cases. Smaller cases, but you work your way up. And after getting some substantial experience, I did what most people said was a stupid move. I left New York and went to San Francisco, where I knew nobody. But I managed to build a practice, and I think for about 1981 to 2015, I was out there representing people who needed a criminal defense lawyer, which are many more people than you might think.
Can you tell us about your career? Because like a criminal defense lawyer, it's always fascinated me. Like, have you defended people that were up against like a capital murder charge?
Not capital murder charges, murder charges.
Okay. And what is that like? I mean, because I suppose in the movies, criminal defense lawyers, they kind of come across, they get kind of maybe a bad rep. They're kind of painted it as like they're defending the mob and all this. You know, in the movies they have, you know, there is like a kind of like you know that series Better Call Saul?
Yes.
Where he,
Sure.
you know that kind of, that's the image. But can you tell us about like what it is like to defend someone that you think might be guilty?
Well, you know, I have a shrewd suspicion that some of my clients might in fact have been guilty, but you can't allow that to be a factor. And all lawyers deal with it differently. Some people don't want to know because they feel it might jeopardize their ethical ability to present evidence in court. And I can understand that. But I think one of the skills a good criminal lawyer has is they can deal with anything. And I've always felt it's better to know. I don't think you have to ask somebody, did you commit the crime? But I think you try and elicit from your own clients the facts as they're willing to give them to you. A lot less surprises. You survive as a criminal lawyer because you realize and you accept that you're not really defending one individual only. Of course, that's your immediate job at that point. You don't care about whether your case will impact other cases or whether it will make good law or bad law. You care about getting your client offer the best deal, but you also understand that you're protecting everybody's rights. And I think every good, serious criminal lawyer understands that they're doing the public a really big service by making it as hard as possible for the government to take away somebody's freedom. And if you don't believe that, you won't be able to survive, or certainly you won't enjoy it. If you're looking only for innocent clients, you only want to help people who you believe, you know, are being wrongly charged, you'll probably have a very small practice.
Has anyone ever told you before the trial that they're actually guilty?
Yes. There are people who just can't keep their mouth shut under any circumstances, and they will come in and, I mean, it doesn't happen often, but there are people who say that, yes.
Any notable cases from your career spring to mind of, you know, anything that you're really proud of?
Yes, quite a few. One was what we called up in Marin County the Fishbone case. And it didn't involve murder, but it was a band, a fairly popular band at that time called Fishbone. They had actually played in the Lollapalooza Festival and other festivals. And they had a really top-flight, brilliant guitarist. And he became delusional. And I don't say that because he had religious views. He just was not in touch with reality. And they felt, I think with justification, that he was living in a cult, and the cult had no interest in helping him. They had interest maybe in getting whatever money he had or just controlling their members. And they decided that they had to help him. And when they called police and went to different authorities, they were all told, we can't do anything about it. I mean, this is his free choice. They felt it wasn't his free choice. He didn't have the mental competency to decide to stay with these people, and he was suffering mentally and apparently some physical health also. So they contacted Cedars-Sinai Hospital in LA, I believe is the name, and they were told, look, if you can get him here, we'll take care of him, we'll fix him up. At least that was how they understood it. Probably a reasonable interpretation of what they were told, but they weren't told it doesn't matter how you get him here. So they decided to kidnap him and bring him down for his own good. And they were caught. And it just, doesn't look good when you've got like plastic handcuffs and planning to tie somebody up and spirit them away and drive them from San Francisco to LA. But I had the good fortune of having some outstanding colleagues representing the other defendants. One in particular was a fellow who passed away named Kim Kruglich. He was a great lawyer who taught me an awful lot, especially in that case. And we went to trial, and we undertook a very, very difficult defense, a defense of necessity. If I were to put it in layman terms, we were trying to persuade a jury that even if they were wrong, and even if they violated the law, a reasonable person in their shoes would have felt there was absolutely no other option. For example, if you heard somebody screaming and yelling for their life inside a house and you broke down the door, you're not intending to be a burglar, you're intending to save somebody. And we analogized it to that. And amazingly, they all were acquitted. And I felt really proud about that one, because it was a unique, unusual, and difficult defense, and because I work with such wonderful colleagues.
What type of personality does a criminal defense lawyer need to have? Because in my opinion, it would be like someone that's, you know, you've got to have a thick skin, you know, you've got to be able to deal with people that potentially have done, you know, bad things, and you're trying to help them. But what would you say, what kind of personality does a criminal defense lawyer have?
Number one, you have to have great self-confidence, and you have to have a thick skin, because you're going to go into a profession in which almost everybody hates you until they need you. Very few people say, yes, you're guardians of our liberty. If we didn't have people like you, you'd have these, you know, type of countries where anyone that the government wants to lock up gets locked up. They're more likely to see you as sleazebags who will do anything for money. And you have to just be able to overcome that and not worry about it. You will get your satisfaction in other ways. First of all, your peers will respect you if you're any good. One of the really finest feelings you ever have is when other lawyers ask you for your opinion on how they should handle a case, or call you up because you had a certain kind of case that's similar to what they have and they want to learn from you. You are not likely to be, you know, getting a lot of accolades from the general public. It got worse and worse, actually. When I started out as a legal aid lawyer in New York City, a very liberal city, you know, it was an honorable profession. When I first got to San Francisco, same thing. You know, as crime started to spiral out of control and it began to be represented different way, not so popular. So you have to really draw strength from yourself and, you know, be aware that what you're doing is really important, and that if people don't like it, well, that's just because they don't understand. You don't get angry at them. In fact, very often it's a chance to educate people. People will ask you, how can you do this? And you tell them why, and you explain to them why, and sometimes they listen, other times they don't. If they don't listen, well, you've learned a little bit more about how to pick jurors. You've learned what kind of people you don't want on your jury.
What do you think about the laws in America? Like, when someone does go to prison in America, they seem to go to prison for like 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, life without parole, compared to, say, Europe, where we you know, murder, I think, could be 15, 20 years. There's always a chance to get out again. What do you think compared to the American system and European?
I think there are a certain number of people who should never be allowed out. That's absolutely true, in my opinion. It's a very small number of people. It shouldn't be imposed as widely as it is in America. I think sentences in general are too long. I think the problem is that very long sentences are given where they're not necessary. Europe doesn't have, or hasn't had, recently the same kind of violent crime waves America's had, so there isn't a huge public outcry. You don't have the same kind of promiscuous gun rules we have. I can assure you, if you had the kind of mass murders that we've been seeing go on in America, Europeans will say, lock them up and throw away the key. I don't think that's going to stop the kind of crimes we're talking about, but I have to say that one of the things I did gain from my years as a criminal lawyer is, as Bruce Springsteen sang in one of his songs in the album Nebraska, there's just pure evil in this world. There are people who should never, ever be let out, but they're very, very small number. I think most crimes where people are sent to prison, they don't need to go to prison. I have met very few people who benefited by going to prison.
Have you ever met real evil, like a real psychopath?
Too many times to recount. I was in the kind of business where you get them all the time. I mean, what would you consider a rapist or a pedophile or someone who regularly abuses their spouse? You know, that's pure evil, in my opinion. In most cases, now they may be mentally ill, but I'm not a psychiatrist. I mean, if I see someone who seems to function normally in most situations, but, you know, I'm persuaded they are a pedophile, a rapist, or a spousal abuser, and nothing seems to stop them. Yeah, there's pure evil in the world, like Bruce said, but it wouldn't stop me from defending them as vigorously as I could and hoping they get off.
And how would you deal with them? How would you, like, talk with them? Like, you know, how would you handle that?
Well, every case is a little different. The first thing you should do, and I think this is what really helps to be a successful criminal lawyer, as hard as it is, every person you sit across the table with, whether it's in your office or in the jail, treat them with respect. And after a while, you walk into that first meeting and you don't have any preconceptions. You don't say, I wonder if they did, and if they did, what kind of you are just interested in doing your job. If you treat these folks with respect, there's a substantially good chance you'll get the same treatment back. And while they may never admit to it and may in fact give you fantastic, ridiculous stories as to what happened, other than that, they'll treat you real respectfully. They won't interfere with you when you're doing your job. They won't tell you how to do it. And sometimes you may be telling them to take a plea. And if you treat them with respect, it will work. I can give you one example if like here. If you represent someone who's a child molester or a child pornography case where they, you know, I don't think that someone who possesses child pornography should be treated as harshly as they are, but those who manufacture and distribute it, yeah. But if you're dealing with someone who isn't, you know, enticing children into horrible acts and filming it, just they have some illness that causes them to enjoy watching it, it's very hard to get them to plead guilty. I mean, and you know that if they go to trial, they could spend decades in prison, but if you are a good negotiator and you've poked enough holes in the case, you can get them a relatively mild sentence, the kind that would outrage most of the public. And if you've outraged the public in that kind of a case because the sentence is too light, you've done a great job. But how do you get that person to do it? Well, you have to, again, treat them with respect. And when it comes down to that, and they know you're right, they don't, you know, they do respect you because you've treated them with respect. You have to talk to them and say, look, I understand the denial. I get it. You know, I've done a lot of things too where I don't want people to know. And you deny it because it works. We all should do things that work. And up until now, the denying it has worked for you. You've got your family to stick with you, and they're going to stick with you no matter what. You got your friends to stick with you, and they're going to stick with you no matter what, because they probably suspect something. So that was a smart move to do what worked. You're a smart guy. Now it's time to keep being a smart guy and do what works and what's best for you. And what works and what's best for you is to go in there and admit to these reduced charges and save your life and be out there so you can be out there with your friends and family in the future. And a lot of times these folks, they get it. If nothing else, they realize he's trying to help me. And more times than not, in fact, most of the time, they will say, let me think it over, and then they'll tell you, yeah, I'm going to do it. And that's because you treated them with respect, and you treated this case just like you would treat a drunk driving case or a check forgery case. You laid out the facts, passed no judgment on the behavior, and help them to make a choice that's best for them.
I listened to a previous podcast that you did, and in that podcast, you really briefly mentioned the mob, and you had kind of some dealings with the mob.
Yes.
Can you describe, because I've always been fascinated by the mob in America, especially New York, like the Irish mob, the Italian mob. I've read books about it. What are these people like?
Well, it depends. If you're referring to the mafia, the Italian mob, that was more a New York case. And while I was at Legal Aid, I just had the good fortune to somehow get dragged into cases that involved the mob. Normally, they hire lawyers, but I was assigned to represent witnesses. And then later on, right before I left for California, I represented someone who was under investigation for being in a mob-related drug deal. All of these people are actually quite good clients because to them, a lawyer is a cost of business the same way, you know, getting a camera is to you. I had more experience with other mobs. In other words, I had tremendous cases involving Latino mobs, or gangs as they call them gangs, but it's the same thing, they're mobs, really. The Asian gangs and the Asian mobs, in my opinion, mirror the Italian mafia almost exactly. I think when, they have their own versions of it back home, and when they come here, they adapt it. How are they to deal with? Well, number one, they always pay you. Never an argument. Number two, they're straightforward with you. They are totally honest. If they don't want to talk about it, they just say, I'm not going to talk about it. Well, sir, I can help your case a lot. If you'll tell no, I can't do anything that might get somebody else in trouble. If I got to do time because of that, I'll do it. And they are just totally straightforward. There are some, that are on the lower level that will try and tell you to do crazy things or offer stupid defenses. And you tell them no, and you say, go talk to, somebody else. And then they'll come back and say, no, I'm going to do it your way. I represented a few Hell's Angels. I think we can call them organized crime. They were the finest gentlemen I have ever represented.
Why? How so?
Because, number one, there's a zillion lawyers. They don't have to come to you if they don't like you, or if you haven't been vetted by some lawyer. Remember, they're usually big cases with a lot of people, and the best well-known lawyers get used up really quickly. So you have to have a good reputation among those top lawyers for the rest of them to come to you. So already they have a favorable view. Second, they understand the system. They're not these knuckleheads who snatch a purse on the street and think I can lie to the lawyer and I can come into court and tell lies and it'll all go my way. They understand how it works. And they will answer your questions straightforward and candidly most of the time, and will treat you with great respect. And as you explain to them what you're going to do for their case, they're listening very carefully. Sometimes they'll add a little insight. And I can't remember any cases where those particular people got angry at their lawyers if they lost. They're pros.
So, Steve, let's get into the Thailand stuff, okay?
Sure.
How did you end up in Thailand for 3 years? Tell us that story.
Okay, well, let's go back to about early 2004. And I was probably at the height of my criminal law practice. I had 2 daughters, both of whom were in college, both with private tuitions. And I decided I wanted to take one, more family vacation. Before, it just wasn't possible because everybody was off, busy with their lives. And I was trying to come up with a place that I could go, for about 3 weeks or so, take a nice break, and be able to afford it and really do it the right way while, handling these enormous private college tuition bills, which probably is nothing like it in Europe or Ireland or England. And I happened to be with a friend of mine who said, oh, let's go out for coffee. I'm going to meet a buddy of mine. He lives in Thailand. I just thought nothing of it, so I went and had coffee, and the man had been living. He had come to Thailand for a brief visit in 1991 or 2, and still there. And he was telling me, he said, I'm telling you, you will be able to stay in the best hotels and travel all around, and you will look like your family will love you. It'll be the greatest thing in the world. My wife is Filipino. We're quite familiar with Asia. We had been to the Philippines many times, and I'd been to Japan, but I hadn't been to Thailand. So I figured, sounds great. Everybody said, sure. And boy, was he right. It was fantastic. I fell in love with the place. So did my younger daughter, who was attending the School of Visual Arts, one of the finest graphic arts schools in the country. It's up there with Pratt Institute, Rhode Island School of Design, and there's 1 or 2 others. She finagled away to study abroad for a year. And that gave me a chance to come back and visit her, and she remained afterwards. I don't know, I'm assuming there was some legal ability. She was painting murals all over the country, mostly in Copenhagen. In fact, I once walked into a restaurant and there was one of her murals. And when she went there to stay for 2 or 3 years, my wife and I went to visit. And being a lawyer, you're always figuring out of everything, how can I make money? And I figured, well, if I did legal work there, I could at least write the trip off. And as I investigated, I began to realize you could actually do an awful lot here. You could get a virtual office that cost nothing. So I set up a virtual office in a building on the corner of Sukhumvit and Soy 31, not too far from where Prime Minister at the time, Abhisit, was living. And when I'd come, you know, it was the early days of web advertising, but actually, I'm a pretty talkative, sociable guy, and I would run around giving out my cards. Bangkok, I'm sad to say, is filled with people who all believe that they had met the one bar girl who really didn't belong there. Problem was the U.S. Embassy did not agree. And there was actually, you know, not a fortune, but you could actually make some money helping these people overcome, if you could. I was very honest. If I thought there was no hope, I'd say, no, I'm not going to take your money. You know, but very often there were things you could do for people. I don't know if you want to get into it, but there were arguments you could make that even the embassy.
Yeah, let us know. I'm interested.
Okay, this man is a wounded, got a Purple Heart in Iraq. He was trusted to lead a platoon into battle. He was trusted with the lives of our fellow Americans. I think we should trust him with the choice of who he wants to marry. If he says this person is now okay, that's good enough for me, should be good enough for you. If the adjudicator was a veteran, you're in, you know? It depends on who it is. You try to do things, but I enjoyed it very much. And I loved being there. I just enjoyed going there. Everybody was super nice. And we kept going there for vacations as long as my daughter was there. And then, sadly, my wife developed cancer. She had cancer 3 times in a short period of time. The last time, around 2014, they said, it's stage 4, it doesn't look like you're going to make it. They, you know, every once in a while they're wrong. And she made a full recovery. There's been no cancer at all. At that point, I said, I've been a lawyer for a very long time. I'm scaling down now. This is the time to enjoy life. There's only one place to go when you want to enjoy life, and that's Thailand. And we went there thinking we'll stay for 6 months. 6 months turned into 3 years.
Well, and tell us about your life. Did you live in Bangkok? Where'd you live?
We lived in Bangkok, in what you'd call the green zone, because I felt most comfortable there. And but we explored the whole city and the whole country. It was a fantastic life. I joined a group, a writing group called Key Bangers Bangkok, which is the only reason that I'm writing today. They encouraged me and nurtured me and gave me the best guidance and friendship. I'm still very good friends with several of the people I met there. I practiced meditation. I did it in America, and oddly enough, in California, I live near one of the largest center of Theravada or Thai meditation. The difference is, in America, you would be taught by someone who says, I studied with the monk. In Bangkok, the monk would walk in the room. That was a fantastic experience, too. Everything about it was fantastic. I studied Thai. I learned, I actually was able to go around speaking it to people, and they understood me and answered back, and I, you know, usually knew what they were talking about. Of course, as you know, with the accents and the pronunciations, there are some, you give them a lot of good laughs. But I just loved everything about it. I still have many people I consider my closest friends, Thai people and, you know, Flangs. I met there. I can't say enough good things about the Thai people and the lifestyle that I lived there.
Why did you leave, and would you ever go back?
Well, I left for a very practical reason. We had sold our house in California and bought a very nice house, brand new house in Tampa, Florida, which I really liked, and I love it there. And at a certain point, it becomes kind of foolish to be paying for the upkeep of a house when you're not living in it. And there are issues with renting it out. Plus, I'm an American. I'm a very political person, you know, on the progressive side, let us say. I don't want to get into this is a political debate, but obviously, with what was going on in America, I wanted to be back there and be in the fight. And the answer, will I go back? Yes. I went back for 2 months last year. And I've told my wife, and she's agreement, I say, look, I'm in for the full fight here through the election in 2024 because I have a burning desire to see that a certain person does not return to the White House and in fact goes to the big house. And when that election is over, however it turns out, my work will have been done. And at that point, I'll feel free to go and do something else. And the first place I would want to go is Bangkok.
You mentioned the green zone. What's the green zone? Is that Sukhumvit?
Yeah, that's where they, I've heard it called the green zone, the green belt, but it's generally the area, say, starting from about En Route, even above now, probably going down to just above Soi Nana.
Probably, is it related to the green BTS line?
I've heard 1,000 different stories about it. Some people have said it's called the green zone because it's got the phalangs with the green money. Others say it's because there's a lot of trees there. I just know they call it the green zone. But it's really where it's got the highest concentration of phalangs because it has the modern apartment buildings and the kind of things, that phalangs like.
Did you live in a condo or a house?
Yes, condos.
Condo. Which condo did you live in?
Okay, several of them. The first place we went to was a place called House by the Pond. Quite a fascinating place. It's a really old building with a very eccentric retired colonel who raises chickens there and gives out organic eggs to people and has rabbits hopping around. And it attracts a lot of eccentric people. That's why I was there. I liked it very much. But my wife began to realize that you could get great condos. So we moved to a place called City Smart and had at least there for about a year or so. That's right on Soi 18. Incredible location because you're right near the BTS and the MRT and wherever you want to go. You want to go to the island, you hop on the, BTS and get the air link and get on the plane and, within a few hours you're swimming. And the service, as I used to say that in America, I could never live like this. I would never live in a condo where you have uniformed people standing at the door and, people who call you up to announce your visitors. It was fantastic. Hiring a maid to come. I'm the maid at home, it was great to have an actual real maid.
What was it like when you left Thailand and you went back to America, that adjustment back to the Western life again? What was that like?
Well, there were, oddly enough, because most of my friends in Thailand, obviously, I think it's generally true, your majority of your friends, no matter how much you try and integrate, are going to be phalangs. And if you're an American, most will be Americans. So I hadn't completely lost touch. What made it interesting was, although my wife and I had visited Tampa and loved it and bought a house there, we really didn't know a lot of people there at that point. But I would say that if there's a part of America that has similarities to Thailand and the kind of people, and that's about it. That Gulf Coast of Florida, people are really friendly and welcoming and warm, regardless of their political opinion, their race, or their religion. They're all pretty nice. So as in Thailand, it was really easy to get to know people. And I was surprised at how quickly I was able to move along in the world of politics and do the kind of things I enjoyed doing. There was a writing group there. I went there. It was very good, but it couldn't hold a candle to the group I had in Bangkok, so I didn't continue it.
As you mentioned writing, let's talk about this, okay?
Yeah, sure.
So we got this book on the table, Bangkok Shadows. I read it. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Tell everybody, what's the plot of this book?
The plot of this book is about a American criminal lawyer, a liberal Jewish American lawyer who had practiced in San Francisco. I wonder where I got that idea from. And he goes to Thailand because of a fortuitous incident where although he's a very moral, in his mind, upright guy, when he has the opportunity to grab cash that no one's going to know about, he does it. And he starts a new life in Thailand, and he has a very good life as a rich expat. Until one day, the CIA decides he's the man to do something for them. And that was to kidnap a Russian gangster based on Victor Bott, the man who was extradited to the US and just released in a prisoner swap. And they decide that these Russians, these gangsters are really smart, and they know, they've already penetrated and they know all the American agents. So what you need is someone they would never dream of being, working for the government, which is Glenn Murray Cohen. Dapper dandy, not uptight, but very, very moralistic. He is probably one of the few, phalang single men who refuses to go into go-go bars because he feels it's just a bad thing to do. Unfortunately, in order to fulfill his role as a CIA kidnapper, he has to impersonate a sexpat, and he must go into it. So the plot of the book is not only how does he pull off this dangerous task, but how does he do things that he finds morally reprehensible. And I found it very interesting, and it gave me a chance to express my interpretation of some of the characters I'd met in my years in Bangkok.
That's what I was just about to say. The expats in this book, you've gone into like depth. You've told their stories, and I just wanted to know: are they based on real people, or?
I think all writers would say every character that you ever create is based on someone you met, along with a lot of other people, including yourself. Because whenever we try and imagine how anyone would act in a given situation, you may say, how would this person act in that situation? A lot of it is really, how would I act in that situation? So they are based loosely, very, very loosely, on people that I did meet, but exaggerated and combined with some other people I've met. But every one of them is based somehow on a person I met. And you know, I hope if they recognize, well, first of all, I don't know how many of them read the book, but if they did, would they recognize themselves, and would they feel it's a fair, since it's not a journalism, I think they'd recognize it's 1/10 them.
You've written a series of these books, is that right?
Yes, there's
how many
four
books?
of them.
Four.
Four, yeah.
Are these available on Amazon?
They're all available on Amazon as ebooks and print editions, and some stores, like chain stores and other bookstores, will allow you to buy the paperback through them. I've decided to go Amazon exclusive for ebooks. It's very controversial whether you should do it or not. I decided it worked for me.
Well, I'll leave the links in the description.
Yeah, absolutely.
No problem. All right, I kind of asked this question kind of towards the end of the interview with everybody I do, most people. When the curtains come down and the show's over, how do you want to be remembered?
You know, I would hope to be remembered as someone who is a straight shooter, that what you sow is what you got. If you like Steve, that's great. If you don't like him, that's also great, because that meant you saw the real Steve. And in everything I've done, I've tried to be an ethical lawyer. I've tried to be a good parent and a good husband. We might get some argument on those, but I want to be known as someone who told the truth and didn't hide who he was and wasn't ashamed of it. And because of that, because of that, treated other people with respect. If I've not treated people with respect, it was unintentional.
Well, Steve, we'll leave it there. Look, you're a legend. It was a pleasure doing it with you. I really appreciate it. And thanks for coming to Dublin, man. You came all the way to Dublin for this.
It's a pleasure to be in Dublin, you know.
Yeah, man. Look, let's do it again in Bangkok next time.
Okay,
right?
Absolutely.
All right.
You got a deal.
Well, thanks very much, everybody, for watching. Hit the like button and leave us a comment to let us know what you thought about the interview. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care of yourselves. That's it. We're done.
Okay.